am Wally the Servo Skull, and this is Dome Runners TV. In this series, we're going to be exploring the rules of the current edition of Necromunda to help get new players rolling dice faster. In later videos, we will talk about building a gang, running campaigns, etc. But for this episode, we'll be starting with the stats for gang fighters and the basic turn structure. This is Wordkeeper Voth, Cawdor Oathkeeper and leader of the Ebon Blades. He's the personal master of executions of a Cawdor cult rumored to follow a crusading sister of battle. Shown here is a gang card for him generated by Yak Tribe. On the top, you'll see the fighter's name, what kind of fighter they are, and their points values, which is the total cost of the fighter, and their weapons and equipment combined, plus any advancements they have. Their stats start with movement. This is the distance in inches that they can go when making a move action, and the base value for their charge action. WS is weapon skill, or your roll needed to hit in close combat, and appears as a range from 2 up to 6 up, representing a roll on a d6. Similarly, ballistic skill is your d6 roll needed to hit with a shooting attack. Strength represents both how hard a fighter hits, but also influences environmental stuff like forcing open a door or breaking a crate. Toughness is how hard a fighter is to hurt. These numbers are 1 through 10, and when tested the player must roll equal to or under their value. Wounds are represented by a number that is decreased as the player takes damage. Initiative is again a d6 roll value used to determine things like catching yourself from falling, disengaging from close combat, etc. Attacks is the number of dice a fighter rolls as a baseline in close combat. The final set of skills are psychological skills that are tested on 2d6. Leadership is a measure of how well the fighter commands others. It's used for testing whether leaders command override fear and other battlefield problems. Cool represents a fighter's ability to stomach danger and keep on fighting. Willpower is their mental discipline and comes up mostly with weird powers. And intelligence is just that, their ability to think their way through problems. Finally, XP is a measure of how many experience points a fighter has accumulated. These can be spent on stat increases as well as new skills. Fighters can also take lasting injuries that reduce skills permanently. Weapons a fighter carries have their own stats too, and fighters can carry up to 3 at once. Voth carries a greatsword. When it comes to weapon stats, there's range, which tells you the ranges that correspond to the accuracy modifier that comes next under short. The first value is the short range, corresponding to the first accuracy modifier, and the second is the long range, which is the maximum range of the weapon and also corresponds to the second accuracy modifier. Distance weapons like long rifles hit better outside of short range, close-up weapons like stun guns and shotguns hit better in short range, and melee weapons can generally only be used while engaged, though in this case the sword is so long that it has an additional long range that you can hit at. Strength represents how hard the weapon hits, while AP tells you how much armor save is negated by the hit. Damage is how many wounds the hit does, and ammo is the d6 roll you need to get to avoid going out of ammo when you roll an ammo check on your firepower dice. Weapons also have traits that influence how they work. These special rules are listed in the various publications where the weapons are printed. These can range from being very situational to incredibly devastating. War gear are other items that don't count towards the weapon limit, but help your fighter in various ways, ranging from armor to protect them from incoming damage, to grenades, to things like medical kits or even expensive furs. Skills are also part of a fighter's profile. They'll be listed in the House of book or the rulebook. There are a range of various buffs that can help personalize your model and make them more effective on the battlefield. Finally, the card lists any additional rules that the fighter has. These will generally be defined in their rulebook. Part 2. The turn sequence. Each turn of Necromunda is broken down into 3 phases: the priority phase, the action phase, and the end phase. The priority phase is pretty simple. The players each roll a d6, and the player who's scored highest gets to activate first. If both players tie, the player who didn't have priority last turn gets priority. If they tie on the first turn, then it is re-rolled. The player can then place a ready marker on each of their fighters. This signifies that they have not yet activated this turn. Also, as this is the start of the turn, draw any tactics cards that the mission calls for. And that's it. Like I said, this phase is simple. Next comes the action phase. This is the bulk of the turn. Starting with the player who has priority, players take turns activating a fighter. When you activate a fighter, you can make 2 actions with them. There are simple actions, which can be done more than once each turn, basic actions, which can only be done once each turn, and double actions, which require 2 actions to complete. Which actions a fighter can perform is influenced by the fighter's status. At the start of your game, all of your fighters will be standing and active. If a fighter gets hit with a ranged weapon or takes cover, they become prone. This is demonstrated by laying the model face up. If a fighter is within 1 inch of another fighter, they're considered to be engaged, which also limits what actions a fighter can take, and if they are prone, causes them to stand up. When a fighter is badly hurt but not yet out of the fight, they're prone and seriously injured. The model is placed face down. Other times, a fighter may become frightened and flee. This is called being broken, which is indicated with a marker. Finally, occasionally a fighter will become insane, which is also indicated with a marker. Some of the varieties of actions fighters can take will be covered in the next section. End phase. If fighters have taken damage, you may need to take a bottle test. Roll a d6 and add the number of fighters who are seriously injured or out of action. If this is greater than the number of starting fighters, your gang is bottled. You'll also need to make a cool check for each of your fighters. If they pass, they stay on the battlefield. If they fail, they flee the battlefield. If a leader passes their check, friendly fighters within 12 inches auto-pass. If a champion passes their check, friendly fighters within 6 inches auto-pass. Recovery tests. For each seriously injured fighter, roll an injury dice. If they get out of action, they are removed. Take the lasting injury roll for that fighter. If it's a seriously injured result, they stay seriously injured. And if they roll a flesh wound, the fighter gets a flesh wound token and becomes prone and pinned. If a friendly fighter is standing and active within 1 inch of a seriously injured fighter, they can roll an extra injury die and pick which results to use. Finally, fighters who are broken make a cool check, adding 1 for each friendly fighter who isn't broken or seriously injured within 3 inches. If they pass, they're no longer broken. If not, they remain broken. Section 3. Action Types. What follows is a list of the actions everyone can do from the rulebook, but note that skills, mission parameters, and tactics cards may allow a fighter to do an action that's not listed here. Standing and active fighters can do the following. Move. This is a simple action. The player moves the distance indicated by their movement stat. Obviously, a simple action, this can be done twice per turn, allowing fighters to cross the battlefield relatively quickly or reposition in a pinch. Charge. This is a double action. The player moves their movement value plus d3 inches towards their target, stopping at 1 inch if they cannot reach base-to-base contact. If they are engaged at the end, they can make a free fight basic action. Crawl through ductway is a double action, allowing a fighter within 1 inch of a ductway marker to set up within 1 inch of the other side of the ductway, as long as it does not leave them within 1 inch of another fighter or overlapping with a friendly fighter or obstacle. Take cover is a basic action, allowing a fighter to move up to half their movement and go prone. Shoot is a basic action, allowing a fighter to make an attack with a ranged weapon. Aim is a basic action that adds +1 to hit rolls for a subsequent shoot action. Fire through ductway is a basic action that lets a fighter within 1 inch of a ductway make a ranged attack against a fighter within 1 inch of the other side. It hits on a 5-up, unless it's a flamer template, in which case, instead, the flamer auto hits all fighters within 2 inches of the other side. Reload is a simple action. Pick a weapon that's out of ammo and make an ammo check for it. If it's passed, the out of ammo marker is removed. Coup de grace is a simple action. If they're not engaged with any other fighters, a fighter within 1 inch and vision arc who is seriously injured immediately goes out of action. This can be performed for free in the place of a fight action if a charge takes a fighter within 1 inch of a seriously injured fighter and they are not otherwise engaged. Operate door is a simple action allowing a fighter to either open or close a door that's within 1 inch. Access terminal is a basic action performed within 1 inch of a door terminal. Make an intelligence check at -2. If passed, the fighter makes the free operate door action regardless of how far away the door the terminal activates is. Force door is a basic action. If a fighter is within 1 inch of a locked door, make a d6 roll and add the fighter's strength, adding 2 for each additional fighter in contact with the door. If the total is 9 or more, it is open. Smash open loot casket is a basic action. Roll a d6 and add the fighter's strength. If the total is 6 or more, the casket is opened, but subtract 1 from the table to determine the contents. Bypass loot casket is a basic action performed within 1 inch of a loot casket. Make an intelligence check. If passed, the casket is opened. Carry is a simple action. If within 1 inch of a loot casket, ammo cache, or other carryable item, make a move action and carry the crate with them, placing it within base contact of the fighter's final location. Standing and engaged fighters can make the following actions. Fight is a basic action, allowing them to make close combat attacks against one or more enemy fighters they are engaged with. Retreat is a basic action. Make an initiative check. If it's passed, the fighter can make a move basic action up to d6 inches. Enemy fighters then make a initiative check, and if they pass, they can make reaction attacks. Prone fighters can make the following actions. Stand up is a basic action that returns a prone fighter to active and standing, facing whichever direction the controlling player prefers. Crawl is a double action. A fighter can move up to half their movement characteristic. Blind fire is a double action. The fighter can make a ranged attack at -2 to hit within the 360 firing arc. Prone fighters can also perform a reload action as above. Prone and seriously injured fighters can only perform a crawl action. Broken fighters must perform the run for cover double action. If the fighter is standing and active, they move 2d6 inches, and if they are pinned or seriously injured, they move half their movement characteristic instead. They must attempt to end their move so that they are more than 3 inches away from an enemy, out of enemy line of sight, in partial or full cover, and are as far away from as many enemies as possible. If the fighter is engaged, they still make the action, but their opponent gets to make an initiative check for each engaged fighter. Any who pass get to make reaction attacks. Insanity. When activating an insane fighter, roll a d6. On a 1 to 2, the fighter becomes broken. If they were already broken, they flee the battlefield. On a 3 to 4, the opposing player can control the insane fighter. On a 5 to 6, they act as normal. At the end of their activation, make a willpower check. If it's passed, they lose their insanity marker. Group activations. Some fighters have the ability to activate other fighters as well. Champions can activate an additional fighter, and a leader can activate up to 2 additional fighters. And skills and war gear can add additional activations on top of that. When using group activations, select the fighter who is making the activation and any fighters that they are activating. Then you can choose to activate in whatever order you want. A leader or champion activated in this fashion cannot themselves lead another group activation. That just about covers the basics of a turn in Necromunda. On the next episode, we're going to talk about moving, shooting, and combat on the tabletop with demonstrations. And in the future, we'll talk about campaigns and arbitrating and other activities to keep the game fresh and interesting. For now, I want to thank everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe. Check the podcast out. And of course, the show is supported by patrons like you.